as far as you have, everybody's business model is different. So well, my company's business model might be different than Danny's and Hugo's, and actually from a lot of the people that are out here, or other investors that come in from, let's say, international. I mean, that was a big thing that I think saved Miami, so to speak, in the last couple of years, was after the, falling off the cliff. You had all this investment from out of the country, other reasons for it, not just because it was, available and cheap. I think there's other reasons with respect to trying to have money to be more safe. I mean, the United States, as far as putting money here, is much safer than in other countries. So, these private developers had other incentives and reasoning. Our business model, we're long-term holders. We look at Class A, and therefore we're very, very selective of our certifications and what we're going to develop and what we're trying to achieve. So instead, Coral Gables to us was a prime location. It would be very difficult for me, going back to my company, going back to my board, going back to my investment group, to get development approved in Highlight. I mean, it's an industrial area. Let's use it as an example. So you have the corridor and what's being looked at. You're going to have different types. So every developer on the private side has a different incentive and a different position. But the certainty is key, and time is probably the number one killer in most of the projects. My personal experience with the city of Coral Gables, out of the South Florida area, Gables, Miami Beach, there's certain cities that everybody knows. Let's just say it's a process. To get my first building permit, it took 14 months. And we basically missed the boat on the last run as far as cycle. We were ready to go. We were maybe, I'll say, 60 days from permit. Everybody fell off the cliff, and the plants went back to the shelf. It took us another 2 years to do some modifications. We went back into the city back in, if I remember correctly, January of 2010. With everything, minus slight modifications, that took 8 months. I just went in for my second phase, that took 8 months. It's very difficult for a private group to come in to try to do a development if the entitlement process, the land's entitled, I have the zoning, we're just talking the building permit, let alone the entitlements. So if the building permit process takes you over a year, I mean, you can miss a lot of things in that process.
Well, we'll talk about how we can improve building permit processing perhaps at another time, but let me go to a different question on the corridor. We know that the FEC corridor is about 100 feet wide, it's got a couple of tracks in it, it's got things on the side, it's got some places, it has walkways and parks and things like that. What do you define as the corridor, though, in terms of development potential? Fabio, you said that your Gables project is 2 blocks from Metro Rail Station. How far from the center and the locations that the cities are telling us they'd like to have their commuter stations do you define as the development corridor for what the future development that would be supportive of that transit?
Okay. Not a simple answer to that question. The reality is, as far as walking distance, as they say, quote unquote, are you willing to walk from your house, from your apartment, from your condo, a block, 5 blocks, 10 blocks? I mean, it gets to a point where it doesn't become really conducive for, a commuter, so to speak. If I have to, in the middle of August, and I have to walk, 16 blocks to get to the train station in Florida, I don't know if that's going to work. So the other question is, okay, well, what's the connectivity from point A to point B? Coral Gables has a trolley system. It's a free bus that the city enacted that goes to 2 of their main corridors. It basically goes all the way up and down ponds, from the north side down the mile, all the way out to the circle, and I think it connects down to UM now. So they created a little integral system, but it gets you to the final destination, which is 2 Metro Rail stations, one in front of UM and then one in front of Merritt Park. The people move over the Metro over in downtown Miami. It's a little absolutely, but now they're looking at it because of the core and the density and the population now has increased, that, oh, we're looking to expand that, because I think they're starting to see, the reality is that Brickell is pretty much, I don't want to say built out, but it's you're there. Now the downtown development area, the true CBD is starting to get created, and then now you're looking at Biscayne Boulevard, north of American Airlines Arena, so you're starting to see that, and they want to connect to Midtown Miami, and then finally the design district. So they're starting to plant the seed and looking at the future growth and how it's moving. But all that's been established. You know what I mean? From a development standpoint, you're talking about this corridor. There's not a lot in that corridor right now that's truly established. That density to create critical mass to start really developing.
I think that the economists and the folks who are actually doing the grant work and looking at economic impact of mass transit corridors will tell you that a half a mile, there's a difference between the ridership issue, which is the walking issue, and the economic impact issue. The technicians will tell you it's a half a mile impact, economic impact on the outside of that corridor. So, for instance, when we were on the Fort Lauderdale DDA was working on the wave and the funding for that, our consultant looked at that half-mile cone outside of the corridor, which is being...
In the various municipal proposals, really struck out to you as something that was like, wow, this is a site that I want to go back and find out more about, or one that said a fundamental something that isn't going to work for us? Hugo, the good, the bad, the ugly. Nobody take this personally, you know, municipal friends. This is an educational opportunity.
The good, I do gotta give points to Dania Beach. I think there's the land is there, the potential is there, the work has been done ahead of us, and it seems to be continuing. So I would give a huge plus. You know, unfortunately, it doesn't have the density and the walkability surrounding the sites that some of the other sites in downtown Fort Lauderdale, you know, up and down across the corridor have. So, you know, that's just my take on the pluses. I wouldn't have any negative sites. That's all.
Denny.
Well, I spoke to Dania Beach, being impressed by the regulatory side. I also echo Hugo's point in that I thought that Hallandale Beach was an interesting site to me. I couldn't quite figure out if it worked without a tri-rail station or not, but I'm interested in the property.
Hinton?
Well, as being biased and having my family own property at Fort Lauderdale and Miami, I'll put those aside for a moment. Yeah, I agree. I echo the comments on Dania Beach. I'll also say for Hallandale, you know, I think it's incredible that the mayor of Hallandale Beach is here. I had the pleasure of meeting her at a competitor's launch party, and immediately was asked when I walked in to have a further conversation about Hallandale and see that they're putting money out of their pocket, out of their budget, to start pushing forward studies and thoughts and ideas, and basic questions that any developer would have. So I think that kind of welcoming, you know, developers aren't bad people. We're willing to take risks. We're willing to go outside of the box, as long as we know that we've got a partner on the other side. So I think both Dania and Hallandale can do those two.
Fabio?
I think all the proposed areas have merit. Nothing negative to any of them. I'm just biased from my past experience up in the Northeast, where I'll take Denny's comment about build it and they will come. So I have a much more reserved opinion and really wanting to see what's going to occur in all these little, in these different segments of the proposed corridor. But I think all the sites have merit. I think they have great potential. It's just, you know, from my perspective, I have to be patient in seeing what's really going to happen, and then I'd be able to make a much more subjective opinion as far as which I want to select.
Okay, let me give you some of the results of our very scientific survey out back. First of all, there's clearly strong support for economic development along the FEC corridor. I think we all felt it, heard it, certainly heard it from our panel. From north to south, there's some interest in areas north of Jupiter. Those people that are interested interested in that, please see me after the meeting. We'll have a group for you, but the largest amount of dots, drum roll please, actually went to downtown Fort Lauderdale. Betty, congratulations. Equally strong was the design district in Midtown Miami. A special shout out in terms of the number of dots and the interest of this group goes to the city of West Palm Beach, city of Delray Beach, Wilton Manors, Pompano Beach, and Oakland Park. If anyone, as we go into questions, have a comment about why they thought a site was particularly strong, I think everyone would like to hear that too. Let me start with some questions from our group. To invest in this corridor, what's one specific thing they could do that would make it more attractive to you as a developer? Nitin?
I think collaborate and create a vision and stick to it and do something so that when, if you're not in office 3 years from now, that doesn't change, right? So I think that it may start with the mayors of these 3 counties getting together with the mayors of the respective cities who will be impacted. Come up with a vision, work with the DDAs, work with ULI. But once you create a vision and there's a commitment to stick with that, I think it will give all the people on this panel and most of the people in the room that are in the business the ability to make decisions off of facts versus thoughts. Because as I mentioned, a very important politician had a bright 9 years ago, this was coming, but it may take another 9 years from today. And despite all the progress all the board's making, I don't know that any of us feel much more comfort that this corridor, the FEC track, is being fast-tracked as well.
Okay. Denny?
I think it's really hard to pick one thing, Deb. The corridor is inherently attractive to the development community. And the issue really will be, a poor pun, but speed. The comment was made earlier by one of the early presenters that the Allport, Florida had to make that trip in 3 hours to Atlanta to be competitive. I think for the FEC to be competitive in terms of the corridor that developers are going to invest in, this effort needs to go. It needs to happen quickly, because again, the way that we get tenants and the way that we build our economic models is all about speed. It's not just certainty. When I was talking about, I gave you the smart answer on time as my response. That is just so mission critical to the investment decisions. Fabio talked about going to his board. If I can't go to my board, say I can get this done in the next 8 months, I've got no business taking up their time.
You go.
Well, I just want to take it a step further what I didn't say about the vision. Yeah, definitely work on the vision. I think the vision is extremely important. But I was taking it a step further about actually trying to implement some of the steps that are required to make that vision possible. And that I always go back to the economics. You know, I think it's extremely important for some of these cities to take on that challenge ahead of the development community and try to make that happen before we get involved. I think it's important for the development community to get involved during the vision process, so we're not seeing, you know, all these high-end and extremely complicated deals that are really unbuildable. But I think it's important for the cities to actually take on that responsibility to entitle the sites before we get involved.
Let me ask you one question on that, though. So they go ahead and they entitle it, and the landowner, you got another private party out there, owns it. Value suddenly goes up. How do you keep it real?
Well,
Or does it matter at that point?
yeah, the market will keep it real. I don't think that's a question. I mean, the landowner might have some different expectations, but the market is eventually going to keep it real. And you know, it's all about time. I mean, I'd rather deal with a little bit more expensive piece of land now than having to deal with a cheaper piece of land that I never know when I'm going to get at.
Okay. Fabio, last comment.
I think all the pieces of the puzzle are here. I think you need to, there's a lot of layers, and I think the quicker that the public sector can, let's say, try to combine all those layers into one single entity, the quicker this is going to get moving and actually being a reality. I think I've heard from what I understand, I mean, this has been a process of what, 9+ years? And it's still a process. You're not there yet. And if it's going to take another 9 years or 2 years or however much more time to actually put the shovel in the ground, you might not have, let's say, us on this panel in another year having the same discussion. You might have another group of people with a difference of opinion. So the public sector, as far as the different regions, have to put someone, kind of their rights be handed over to more of a true regional establishment and let them take control and get this thing, out of the ground. I think that's going to make it go quicker than going through these commissions and these groups and these market studies and continuing process. I think you have all the pieces there. I think the vision is there. It can be a great system. It's time to get it out of the ground.
And with that, I'd like to thank our panel for their insights. And